In today's episode, we're going to be talking about what technology and what systems do you need to start a real estate investment company or to run a real estate brokerage business. We're going to be talking about okay, how to get data, how to find phone numbers. We're going to be talking about how to narrow the data. Once you have a large list, how to narrow it down to a smaller group of people that are more likely to sell the property. We're also going to be talking about different methods for reaching out to people and different plugins that you can input to your database to make your database more efficient and so that you can talk to homeowners at the right time. Now, when I got started in my real estate company, I noticed that I was very systems oriented, but most investors and most agents weren't. And this was one of the things that helped me with growing my real estate company. To help us with that, we've got Abel Contreras with Invest Slow, who's a local investor and a local real estate broker. Welcome to the podcast, Abel. How are you?
Jose, thanks for having me. I'm doing great. How are you?
I appreciate you coming out. Start talking about, before we get into the large data providers, this is what I tell new people starting their database. Before you start reaching out to people that don't know you, I usually recommend reaching out to people that know you, like you, and trust you. In order to do that and to do it systematically, you're going to need some sort of CRM, or you're going to need some sort of spreadsheet or something to keep track of these people. What do you guys use as a CRM and why?
So when I first got started, I got started with Mojo Dialer,
Uh-huh.
which it's a very low grade CRM. All you have is really just a calendar and a list of people you can call, but it's very simple and it actually worked okay. But then we integrated with Follow Up Boss. So Follow Up Boss, it just has a lot more different features. You can separate and segment the database a lot nicer and neater. And there's a lot more like plugins that you can pull into Follow Up Boss. You can email, text, call out of the CRM. With Mojo, you really only could call.
Now, let me ask you this, because you mentioned something very simple. You're like, well, look, it had some basic features and it worked at that time. A lot of people overcomplicate the whole CRM thing and they're like, oh, what's the best CRM? And the
Yeah.
best quote that I heard was, the best CRM is the one that you actually use and the one that you actually use. So let me ask you this: how would you set up a follow up boss in a way where it has it's set up to help you follow up on people, basically?
So Follow Boss is nice because there's a category called stages. So you can have like seller leads, buyer leads, investors, right? And then within that, you could have like A meaning like right now, B meaning 2 to 6 months out, C meaning 6 plus. So the better you just like segment whoever is currently in your database, then it'll allow you to like know who you should actually be calling, on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis.
So I think that's the struggle that most people have, is that they have the database, they just don't know how to segment it as well too, basically. At least that's the struggle that a lot of the agents or people that have a CRM don't know actually how to use it. So if I'm hearing you correctly, the best way to do it is to segment the list in a way where maybe like your sphere of influence and then like your cold leads are segmented by when they're going to do something, meaning by timing, basically.
Yeah, time frame based.
Yeah, we have the same exact thing. We have them hot within 30 days, nurture 30 to 90, and then watch, which is 90-day plus. And then everybody else is just like an archive, basically, but we use the same. How is the CRM different than just getting large pieces of data? And then who are the large data providers that a person can get data
Yeah,
from?
so the only people in our database marked as some type of a lead are people that we've talked to that have expressed somewhat of an interest in buying, selling, or investing, at whatever time frame. But then we have just a ton of records. We might have 100,000 records off in its own bucket, and those are people that we haven't talked to yet. All that we know are their homeowners, and we have their, name, phone number, email address. But then really the thought process there is how do we take that big, big list of records and end up with leads in our database that we're actually talking to. A data provider that I'd recommend looking into is called PropStream. One reason it's cost effective, it's $100 a month, and you can download, records straight into Excel, right, and play with it from there. Um, and it also depends if you live in a large metro market like Los Angeles, where you have millions of people, or a smaller submarket like San Luis Obispo, where I'm at. And I think there's like 100,000 homeowners in the whole county, right? So what we did is we took a multifaceted approach, like a broad marketing approach, and then a very targeted marketing approach. So within PropStream, you can put filters on your data. So if you only want to be talking to people with high equity, out of state, absentee, you can narrow that down. What we did is we took the whole 100,000 and put them in one bucket. And then we took the divorce, tax liens, pre-foreclosures, out of state, high equity, absentee, people that own a lot of rental properties in a portfolio. And then there's a software on top of that. It's called a list stacking software. So let's say there's somebody that's in pre-foreclosure that lives out of state and they have a lot of equity. Well, now they're on three of our top 10 lists. And then we know with a high degree of probability that that person is a more likely motivated seller than somebody, just randomly in that big list.
I love it. So it's funny because we had the two different buckets. We had the people that we've talked to, which that's our CRM. And
Yep.
then we had the cold buckets, which is just the very large list, and then finding ways of narrowing down that large list to people that are more likely to do something. You said list stacking has a certain software. Do you know that off the top of your head, or do you mind sharing what that is?
Yeah, we use REI Sift. And what that does is, again, you can take all the data that you've pulled from PropStream or any other major data provider, as long as they, tag it as pre-foreclosure, high equity, right? And then it'll take your 100,000, and then we can get, 10,000 that we figured out, okay, these people are on four or more lists. So then what we would do at that point is label that 10,000 list as a high priority. So then it would actually make sense, even for me myself to sit there and call through that list, because I know with a high degree of probability, I'm going to find people that need to do something soon, versus if me or my team are just sitting there calling 100,000 people over and over again, it's going to take a lot of time to figure out, right, who we should really be talking to. And it's more of just a numbers game at that point.
Yeah, it's funny because very common real estate agents that just do just listed, just sold, which means that they're looking for a needle in a haystack. And
Yeah.
obviously, like this approach is like more targeted based on different levels of motivation. So skip tracing, what's the best way to find people's phone numbers?
Yeah, so as long as you have the data, which includes a name, an address, and a mailing address, you'd be able to plug it into various different third-party providers. The one that we use is called Batch Leads,
Mm-hmm.
Need to Skip. So then within a few minutes, you pay, I don't know, between 5 to 10 cents a record to get those skipped. So if you have a huge list, it could cost a couple $1,000, but if you have a relatively small list, it'd be a couple $100. And then what that's going to do is it's going to give you 3 to 4 phone numbers. Usually they have like an 80% match rate, which means 8 out of 10 chance when you call them, one of those phone numbers is going to be correct. And then they're going to give you emails too, but those are, less accurate oftentimes.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you this. Do you guys ever use Forewarn at all?
Um, I use for like
Individual.
one-off, yeah, we
Yeah.
use something called Locate Plus,
Uh-huh.
and it's a database that typically you need a license for, whether you're like law enforcement or a credit agency, right? So you have to fill out the paperwork correctly to get the license for it. It's also like $100 a month, but then usually like 9 out of 10 times you're gonna find that phone number. Um, one of the agents on my team has forewarned, and it seems to be pretty accurate though.
As well, too,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah.
It sounds like the one you use is at a higher level, basically.
Yeah, we've had a lot of success with it.
So let's say now you have the list, right? You've done the list stacking, you've narrowed it down to the people that are more likely to, or let's dig in a little bit more on the list stacking. What are some of the different motivating factors that you would say make the best list?
Pre-foreclosure,
Mm-hmm.
but you're not going to have a ton of those, right? But that's always a good one to use. Out of state owners or even absentee owners, just meaning they do not live in that property. High equity is always good because that means, if they do sell, there's going to be a significant payout for them. Um, Tax liens, probate, pre-probate. Also, you can filter down with number of properties owned. So
Hmm.
sometimes, we interact with older clients that over time have picked up a big portfolio. And then
Hmm.
you can also go by age, um, things like that. But so there's not necessarily one list that I would say is like the best, but the list stacker, what it allows you to do is like, okay, if they're on 3 or 4 or 5 of these lists, then we know, okay, well,
There's likely going to do something at some point, basically.
yeah,
Yeah, it just increases the probability of them doing something. A lot of these systems, are they more seller oriented or buyer oriented, and why?
they're all seller oriented. I've never had much success with doing buyer
Yeah,
deals. I think a lot of it just has to do with like effort. I never really
yeah,
with it, but then anytime we ever invested any money into a buyer lead program, like whether it be Facebook ads or what have you, it was just the lead quality was so terrible that it felt like we were wasting our time even calling them.
yeah.
I know some agents have had some success with more expensive programs like Zillow or Realtor.com where you're paying a couple $100 or $1,000 a lead, but then that never really made sense to me either. So all of what we do, anything we spend money on from a marketing standpoint, it's all seller leads. On the residential side of the business, we're very listing focused. About 80% of our business comes from listings.
Hmm.
And then on the off-market stuff, obviously with wholesaling or flipping, we're doing business with sellers. Um, and then the buyers we're doing business with are, usually repeat cash buyer type clients.
It's funny because a lot of the marketing that we do as well too is towards the seller, and then a lot of times if you have enough listings, a lot through the marketing that you do of the listings, the buyers just call basically,
Yeah.
so the listings attract a lot of the end buyers. um okay, so you have this list now. What are the different methods that somebody can use to utilize them? Is it like through door knocking? Is it through mailing them? Is it through calling them? Is it texting? What would you say are different ways that people can do?
So we use a multifaceted approach. We're trying to hit them from all different angles because some people don't pick up the phone, right? With today's amount of spam calls. But it also depends on the size of your organization and where you're currently at with your business. So if you're just starting out and you're running a one man or one woman show, what I would recommend is getting a dialer, and you can use something like a Mojo dialer, a Ready Mode, or an Enzo dialer. And what that allows you to do is take your list, let's say it's 10,000 records with high motivation, and then you just sit there on the dialer and it dials multiple people at a time. Make sure you're following all TCPA
Guidelines.
ordinances there, so you don't get in trouble. And then what that's going to do is just going to allow you to be a lot more efficient. So you should be getting about 50 contacts a day if you're doing it yourself. And then out of those 50 contacts, you should probably have like a 10% conversion rate in terms of creating a lead, right? So out of the 50 people you talk to, you're probably going to generate like 5 leads where they're telling you, yeah, we're thinking about doing something. So again, that's what I'd recommend for somebody like first starting out or they're running kind of a solo operation. If you have a bigger budget and you're trying to maximize your own personal time, then I'd recommend an outsourcing the dialing aspect. And there's companies out there like Enzo Dialer where you can hire 1, 2, 3 callers 40 hours a week for a pretty nominal fee. And then what they do is they will send you the leads that have said, yes, I'm thinking about selling. So now you're only calling back the people that have already raised their hand. So again, it goes back to that needle in a haystack analogy. Instead of just calling anybody and everybody hoping you're getting lucky, you can create a system to where you're only calling people back that have already raised their hand, which just creates a lot more efficiency if there's only, so many hours in a day. So that would be the dialing aspect. We also use outbound texting.
Hmm.
So also something to be weary of. There's a lot of like new TCPA regulations where you can get fined quite a bit if you're, mass texting people. So you have to do it the right way. So we use a third-party provider called Certified Media, and they have all of the TCPA regulations figured out, and it's their company that's doing the outbound. So any complaints or what have you, that would get circumvented to them, and they would be responsible. So what Certified Media does, for example, is they'll guarantee me 50 seller leads a month for a couple $1,000s a month that have responded positively to a text conversation. Yes, I'm thinking about selling. Yes, I would consider an offer. At that point, then my team gets a notification, okay, reach out to this person in a couple days.
Which
So
eventually you want to graduate from the, because I started off making the phone calls, and that was when I had very little money to invest. And eventually, like you said, there's companies that you can hire to make some phone calls, and then your highest and your best use becomes doing some of the follow up. Then your highest and best use, you keep graduating into highest and best use, basically, where eventually you even get to the point where you're at, where you graduate out of even going on the appointments, you know?
right.
And then you're basically the one helping generate the leads as well too, and helping the agents convert those leads.
Yeah, exactly. And it took like 7 years to get here. I used to do the circle dialing myself, just the 100,000 list, go through one city a week, get 5 leads a day. They're obviously, we had talked about the cash conversion cycle of different
Yeah.
types of leads. And when you're just personally calling people through a neighborhood, even if they say, yeah, I'm thinking about it, typically that's like a 6 month plus conversion, right? Because you're catching them right when they're like even starting to think about it. You get
Yeah.
lucky every once in a while, but it is a very great skill to have to be able to do that yourself. It takes a lot of discipline.
Oh yeah. Not only that, but I feel like that helped me in being able to communicate better with a lot of the leads now. That ability to be able to do that for years, actually, I would say it allowed me to be able to communicate better with homeowners, which I'm guessing that it probably did the same for you.
Yeah, and then it also gives you more gratitude on the value of a lead, right?
Yeah.
You're paying for a lead, like how hard it was for you or me personally to generate even just one lead, or how long it would take. So then every lead becomes a lot more valuable in our eyes.
I didn't think about it from that perspective, but now that you mention it, it actually, like, wow, like I used to have to call 50 people or 40 people, spend 3, 4 hours to generate this. So it makes it a
Yeah.
lot more of that appreciative approach. Let's talk about, like, now somebody raises their hand and they're interested in selling their property either through cash or real estate brokerage. At that point, I'm imagining that's where either you set an appointment or they go into your follow up boss campaign, right?
Yeah, then they're getting tagged as a lead, right? A, B, or C, which is, right now, maybe a couple months, or I'm super far out. And then, me and my team then go within our own database and make our follow-up calls based on that. So if we get a brand new lead that comes from a texting campaign or a cold calling campaign, then we want to talk to them within just a few days of them raising their hand. It doesn't have to be right away. Because they don't even necessarily need to associate you with the text or the original phone call. We're just, again, in the right place at the right time now. Hey, Jose, calling about 123 Main Street. Was just curious if you've ever even thought about selling your house. And then again, with a high degree of probability, you're probably going to say yes because you just told somebody else that you were.
Yeah. Amazing. Okay. So there's a couple plugins that we talked about. Tell us about those. So, like, my database is probably like 40,000 people in that database. And I know that there are people in there that do business with other people and that we're not able to get to them at the right time. Because I think a lot of this has to do with just touching base with people at the right time, being there at the right time for them. So, what advice would you give to agents or investors that are looking to maximize more out of the database and talk to people at the right time?
Yeah, so just adding a couple extra tools to increase efficiency. And I'll get into two of them that we personally use. One is called Revaluate. So I use Follow Up Boss as my CRM, and they have a plugin that connects directly. What Revaluate does is it takes my database of 13,000 people, and as long as there's an email associated with the record, it will give them a score between 0 to 100. Most people fall somewhere in the middle. If you're 100, then the system has recognized, hey, this person has listed their house or it's recently sold, right? So it's essentially a lost opportunity. If it's anything above an 80, based on the data analytics that they use, it would justify a call. Hey, Jose, how you doing? It's been a little while since we last talked. Was just curious where you're at with thinking about selling your house. The way that they do that is through cookies online. So anytime you and I are on a website, you'll notice those, allow cookies or disable cookies.
Yeah.
Every single website's tracking our activity, and then that data gets sold to data brokers. So what Revaluate is basically a data broker. that has this, huge amount of metadata, and it tracks if I'm on Zillow looking in another market, or if I'm looking up a moving company or schools in this other area. And that's how it's scoring me on 0 to 100. So anything above 80, it's worth probably me or my team's time just to touch base with them. The other cool thing about Revaluate is it gives you a scorecard. So when you log in and you look at your scorecard, you'll see all of the recent listings that you did not get that somebody else got, and then all of the recent sales, right, that a homeowner sold. So a lot of times you're a bit frustrated, like, wow, I was talking to that person for 2 years, forgot to call them, and look what happened, right? So it keeps you and your team accountable too, because we can show it in real time how many lost opportunities we missed just by not, touching base.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I learned early on in my career, and I'll share it with people, it was at a Mike Ferry seminar, because I used to talk to 100 people in a day.
Mhm.
And this guy was like, okay, out of 100 people, how many people are you getting to say maybe yes to the next step? And let's say that that number was 10 people, right? And then what he said is, he's like, what do you do with the other 90? And then a lot of the agents' mentality was like, well, I'm not looking for the other 90. I'm just looking for the 10 that say yes. So he's like, well, that's very short-term thinking. You're going to find yourself always just looking for the 10 people. He's like, you got to find a solution for the other 90. So what he recommended at that time was that for the 90 that are saying no, is that we collect their email address and add them to our database, like the Follow Up Boss or Real Geek. So a lot of the 40,000 people database comes from having those conversations with people. Now, with tools like this to reevaluate now from the 40,000 people, now you can get people to raise their hand so you don't have to go through that 40,000 person database. But what I would say is that's like more of a long-term approach versus like short-term like thinking basically. Um,
Yeah.
what other systems would do you use in your real estate company? So obviously we've talked about like the seller process. What other
Mhm.
systems are you going to need to run a real estate company?
I mean, operations is huge. So we have two full-time virtual assistants that, do our database management. So
Mhm.
they're adding leads, they're tagging leads, they're organizing. We also have a full-time in-house operations manager in office, and she's managing, all of our files and doing the seller communication for us once they've signed a contract. So that way me and my three agents can spend, 80% of our time continuing to prospect, right, and drive new business to the table. And that's, the short version of operations. Obviously, they do a lot more. But without them, we would be probably doing like a third of the business that we currently do because we'd be managing.
Yeah. Well, I think that's where a lot of agents get bogged down. We use Trello to manage the transactions, or not to manage. That's where we have all our checklists in there. You might use Follow Up Boss as well too to have like certain
Yeah,
client
there's follow-up boss. You just push a button, right? Start listing checklist, and
perfect.
then all the assistants can see it. I think they also like to use Asana,
Yeah.
which, it's very similar to Trello.
Trello. Yeah.
And then Google Sheets, and we're always refining our systems too. And I always take feedback at our team meetings, like, hey, what's working, what's not, where do we need to improve? Like, what are the pains that you're experiencing? Because I'm not really like too involved. So, right. And then
You're basically looking at problems to make it smoother.
yeah.
What about cash buyer system? So like let's and I was thinking about this recently because there's a lot of agents that work with buyers,
Mhm.
and when they're working with the buyers, they're having to go out and look for buyers. There's actually ways to target cash buyers that do multiple deals in a year and start to build relationships with these people. Like I have a client that is a cash buyer. I've sold a couple properties for them, and they just texted me like, "Hey, look, we bought this on the MLS. We don't have an agent. We'd like to get your opinion of value, and potentially work with you if the numbers make sense." Basically, but that's a
Yeah.
client that I've done like 3 or 4 deals already. So I'm thinking that if you are going to work with buyers, establishing a business model around cash buyers is actually a pretty good business model. So how would somebody go about what systems, tools, technology would somebody need to build a system around building relationships with cash buyers?
Yeah, so I'll give you three different systems. One of them's free, one of them's very cost effective, and then the last one's a bit more
Mhm.
pricey. So the free way to do it would just go on MLS, and you can actually put a search filter into the MLS with an additional field, buyer financing, and click cash. right? You're still going to need to thumb through those recent sales to see like, okay, was this just a really nice house that somebody bought cash? What you're looking for are like the dilapidated, obvious fixers that somebody paid cash for, right? And then within the MLS, you can go to tax records and find that buyer's info, at least their name and their address. You'd still need to find their phone number with another provider. But again, that would be a free way. I'd say if somebody spent just a couple days on that, they could probably end up with 40 to 50 people that they should then go reach out to. Um,
Now,
cost,
now let me ask you this. What if it's a corporation?
if it's an LLC, most likely, you can just go to the California Secretary of State, type in that LLC's name, and you can find out who the registered agent or manager is. So it just takes one little extra step, but you can still, with that information, then go find their phone number, right?
Amazing. I think there's another website called Open Corporates, which I
Mhm.
think does the same thing. But it's funny because I shared that tip with somebody in Texas one time, and they're like, "What? You can do that?" And I'm like, you're leaving so much money on the table by not being able to touch base with these people, you know?
Yeah.
So that was like mind blowing to them that you could actually find out who the registered agent is and then find the phone number to the registered agent, basically.
Yeah, so I used to do like a lot of multifamily prospecting, and that's I almost had to do that every single time, right? Because all those multifamily properties are owned in LLCs. I eventually had my virtual assistants do that for me and came up with a little system to save me time. But yeah, if it's in an LLC, like take 1 or 2 extra minutes, you find the person. So that would be, the absolutely free way if you
Freeway.
have zero marketing budget. $100 a month back to PropStream. You can click, within a geographical region, and there's a cash buyers function, and it'll show you all of the recent cash purchases and cash sales. So it'll show you, okay, this person bought it for X, 7 months later, he sold it for Y, right? And then you have the LLC or individual's name, address, mailing address. Again, you still need to go hire somebody else to get you the phone number. But again, that would $100 a month. I think in my little tiny submarket, there's like 400 of those at any given time, right? So I can just refresh that, right? Have somebody find the phone number for me and then just make introductions. Hey, Jose, I noticed you recently bought and sold that flip. Congratulations. I'm just curious, was that like a one-off or are you looking for, more deals to do? And if
Yeah.
they're looking for more deals, they're going to be happy to tell you what they're looking for, right? And then you can start to feed them what they are looking for, whether it's on or off market.
And this is actually a really good business model. Like, meaning, like, I know agents that all they work on is with investors. They got 2 or 3 people that do 3 to 5 to 10 deals a year. And you can basically make a pretty good living just working for those people exclusively as well. What's the third way?
The third way, it's a software system called Investor Lift. So what Investor Lift did is they created a software to take it a step further than what PropStream will do. So it'll take all of those buyers, whether they bought it cash or through financing, right? Because a lot of people are getting hard money loans. They'll give you their estimated profit on the deal that they recently sold based on the purchase price. They'll also tell you how many deals that person's done in the last 12 to 24 months. And then it's also going to rank people in terms of a score. So some people might have like a 500,000 score, which means that they're like, it's a professional company. All they're doing is flipping, houses at volume. Somebody with like maybe a 5,000 score, maybe they did a one-off. But again, you have that whole range, right? Broken down based on activity. And then within Investor Lift, similar to PropStream, I think Investor Lift will actually give you all their phone numbers.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of saves you a step. And then you would have then the option to reach out to them individually, right? Call them like we're talking about here. Or they have another option where you can actually, if you have a deal to sell, like let's say you have a really good off-market deal, you don't have a buyer for it right this second, you can publish it on their site and it's like an off-market MLS. So then it's available for people to view. And then you can also push a button and it'll send it out to thousands of people that are already registered in their system with their text and their email. So it can really create a lot of efficiency if you're, wholesaling properties, at volume. But I think that's between like $6,000 and $12,000 a year. So it really only makes sense as if you're, assigning contracts on a monthly basis.
Any other systems or tips that you think would be helpful to somebody either looking to build a real estate investment company or building a real estate brokerage that's mainly sellers based?
Yeah, I would say because we've mainly talked about sellers here with data and marketing and outreach. If you had, maybe $1,000 a month for a budget, you could start to build a buyer's list with what we just talked about, whether it's MLS, PropStream, or Investors List, and hiring like a virtual assistant to call through that list for you and start to, create relationships with people that are very active in the market. Because let's say you have a really good seller deal, right? And they want to do something off market. If you have a list of like 100 very, very active buyers, you're going to be able to monetize those seller leads a lot easier versus feeling like you're stuck. Like, what do I do with this really good lead?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. Great. Now, if somebody maybe is interested in either buying, selling, or a good opportunity in San Luis Obispo, how would people get in contact with you?
My phone number is 805-709-7143.
Love it, man. I want to say thank you for taking the time to be on the podcast today. For our viewers out there, we talked about how to set up lead generation systems in terms of technology and systems to help you. We talked about everything from data providers, skip tracing, list stacking. We talked about different plugins that you can utilize. I want to say thank you again to our viewers. If you've enjoyed it, make sure to hit that subscribe button. If you feel that it would be helpful to somebody, make sure to hit that share button. Abel, thank you. And to our viewers, until next time.